Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Creepy Fox Scary Stories podcast. Today we'll be covering a topic and a theme that has been highly requested for quite some time, and that's some scary hospital and scary emergency room stories. Now, the interesting part of today's episode is you're actually going to be getting a story that comes from my perspective. It happened on August 31st of this year, so just a few weeks back from the making of this video. Speaking of which, I've gone ahead and included some footage so you can see how crazy it was. But yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and get started with these scary and true hospital and emergency room stories that you haven't heard on any other narration channel. Let's get started. This happened on the night of August 31st, 2022 at Providence Hospital, and it happened to me, the Creepy Fox. I've been waiting a little while to share this story because it left me quite shaken and a bit traumatized. Thank you, however, to everybody who checked up on me over on my Instagram account when I ended up posting about this in my Instagram story. I am ready to tell you all about it now, so I've pretty much written this out, similar to the style of how all of you send in your stories and how I present it to all of you. So with that said, here goes. Now, to quickly catch people up on this past year, just in case you're new, since I figured I'd give you some context that leads up to this, I've been recovering from quite a few surgeries after complications arose with my health. A 10-centimeter giant cell tumor was found in my left leg last year, and because of it, most of the inside of my left leg had to be replaced with a prosthesis, as well as an artificial knee. Right on top of this, blood clots found in my body, with one being so serious that was found in one of the veins leading to my heart that I almost died. I actually required 6 months of blood thinner injections twice a day. Let's just say I've been in and out of the hospital, as well as the emergency room quite a bit. August 31st of this year was no different, as when going to the restroom, I ended up having bleeding in my stool. So because of that, I got taken to the emergency room. And basically, it was due to the painkillers I'm taking for pain management, and that's what caused me to strain so much and bleed, because the painkillers I'm taking, it causes bad constipation. But that's just some context to why I was there at the emergency room that night. Something horrifying happened toward the end of that visit, and I have some footage I filmed to show you all as well, which I will verbally let you know once it's on screen, for those of you who aren't looking at the video and just listening. So anyway, let me go back a little bit that night. My sister had now joined me since a family friend had dropped me off at the hospital, and we're in the front lobby awaiting the doctor to call us back, after a nurse had escorted us out of there to wait. There were roughly 15 people in the lobby, including one woman who was standing by the door to greet people, and the girl at the front desk checking people in. It was approximately 8:15 p.m., so no more than 10 minutes of us waiting in the front lobby as I sat there in my wheelchair talking to my sister about just some random things to pass the time. A nurse calls my name and my sister wheels me to the back area where all the emergency room doctors and nurses are attending to the patients. We get put in a hallway with an elderly couple to the side of us as they're talking to one of the doctors, and another woman was sitting toward the end of the hallway with her kids. And after about 2 minutes of just sitting there, we were suddenly interrupted by a loud crashing sound. It lasted for a good 10 solid seconds. In those moments, I started thinking to myself, what was that? At first, it sounded like a bomb had just gone off, and that's what everyone assumed when we could hear an alarm going off and people screaming and crying. Even now, I can still hear those cries, and they're bone-chilling. After that thought, I started thinking, was this an earthquake? But there was no shaking. A shooting? That was something I was fearing, as even that elderly woman sitting in front of my sister and I said that. But actually, here's what happened. And my sister and I are thankful to God that we survived, as you'll soon hear why. What happened was, after hearing the crashing sound and people screaming and crying, a nurse from the front lobby comes running in crying and saying, "There's a car in the lobby. Somebody crashed into the lobby." I still recall the fear in her eyes as people in this back area started crying, thinking to themselves, What about their families who were in the front lobby? I'm not ashamed to say that I started to shed tears thinking about the people that were there. I mean, imagine. Even a nurse who had been attending us was shaking and trying to tell us that it was going to be okay, even though we could tell that she was holding back tears as well. But then just like that, we saw without no hesitation whatsoever as all these doctors and nurses, and even a couple of first responders who had been there, booked it to the front lobby. Bear in mind, at this point, we don't know if we might have been under attack and this could have been some sort of plot of a terror group. After about 30 seconds of uncertainty, with doctors instructing the nurses to get those who are injured onto stretchers, we watched as a single man, elderly, being stretchered with a bunch of blood on his arms. In the moments we did see him, he did look awake, just completely looked like in a state of shock. We now overheard a doctor say, "He's being taken to UCI." UCI is another hospital about 30 minutes away from where we were at. I still don't know why they were going to do that since they already had him here at this hospital, but I guess only they truly know. Anyway, what turns out crazy is that no other people are being stretchered back here, so then we start thinking, oh my god, there might be some deceased individuals in the lobby. That wasn't the case, however, and as we would find out 20 minutes later, once we saw a doctor and we got discharged, we realized how close we were to dodging a bullet. This is the part of the narration where I'm going to show you some footage so you can see for yourself and look at the screen. Where the car had driven into, my sister and I were just a few feet away. Bear in mind, I can't run because of my leg, and I was in a wheelchair, so I started thinking to myself, imagine we hadn't been called at the time we were? I don't even know if we would be here to tell you this story, and it truly humbled us. It's a miracle that nobody was hit in that lobby, but as for the driver, I'm not exactly too sure. I don't know if he was intoxicated or because of his age, maybe he had a heart attack or something, but it's weird as I can't find anything in the news. I spoke with some friends and they told me they saw a report about it on KCAL 9 News, but I can't find it even on their YouTube channel. If anyone in SoCal area finds a clip or a news article or can update me in the comments, let me know so I can add it as a pinned comment on the videos so people can see it for themselves. I'd like to know what happened to the driver too, and I want to know if he's okay. But yeah, it's really weird. If you look at how the car is positioned, it's pretty in there. There's also a little roundabout you need to drive into, and so you'd think this car would be at an angle, but it's straight in there. Also, he had to have been driving at full force, which does explain that loud crashing sound we heard, because there were even cement pillars in front of the lobby doors. I don't know, it's pretty crazy. I'm sure it's back to routine back at the hospital, but that night was something I'll never forget. And that's considering I've seen and experienced some pretty messed up stuff that perhaps I can talk about in future videos. Hey everyone, before we continue with today's episode, I just wanted to remind you all that about 70% of you who watch and listen to my videos are actually not subscribed. Do make sure to double check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. As of late, YouTube has been unsubscribing people for no apparent reason whatsoever. It really does go a long way to help grow this community, so just take those couple of seconds to check. But anyway, with that said, let's continue on with these true scary stories. Hey Creepy Fox, a nurse here to say 1. Thank you for your amazing narration videos. 2. Hoping your recovery is going well. And 3. Wanting to share a couple of my stories with you that I think would be perfect for one of your videos if you ever decided to do a themed episode on hospitals or the emergency room. Now, I've seen my fair share of pretty gnarly things. People who were in car crashes, one time when somebody came in because their arm had been cut off in a freak accident, and even once when somebody came in because, as I later learned, he was on drugs and in his head he thought he could fly, and so he jumped off the roof of a friend's house. He survived, but with a lot of broken bones. Anyway, here is one story in specific that might not be scary in the sense that it involved a scary person and me being chased with a knife or a gun, but scary in the sense that I was watching somebody possibly meeting their end and I was able to bring them back to life. Anyway, I'm in the emergency room attending some patients, as well as making some rounds checking up on some new nurses who had just started with us no more than a couple of weeks before. As I started to make my way over to the restroom area, I heard somebody yelling for help, as well as screaming too. It's the emergency room, so you're used to these sorts of noises. However, as I make my way over to the source of the noise, there's a woman lying flat on the floor with a bottle of medication lying next to her, and I could tell that she's having a hard time breathing. Now, this could of course be multiple things. Did she just have a heart attack? Did she pass out? Don't know. But when I take a look at the bottle of pills, I look at the label and see that it's a prescription for this woman of oxycodone. An overdose? So it seemed as I start to ask the woman what was wrong, but she's still breathing heavily and is struggling to speak. By now, some more nurses are coming over, and it's at this point I'm asking for Narcan, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically an antidote for opioid overdoses if you take too much. Now, I'm going to get a bit nerdy here, but I think it should give you some insight to just how scary this was in reality and how serious these drugs are. Here is a basic rundown. Basically, when you take narcotics, opioids, they bind to opioid receptors in your body and release pain relief, which then those signals get sent to your brain. Well, we already have some form of painkilling done in our body. It's how you can bump your elbow into something and it's not going to hurt forever, right? Well, the opioids pretty much attach to the receptors and they overhaul your system and your brain. So much so that if you take too much, your brain doesn't have enough time to process things and it forgets to do things, such as breathing. It's one of the many reasons to why people overdose, because these opioids and narcotics can give you a sense of euphoria, but as you start to take more and more of the narcotics, your body needs more to get that high for people who abuse it and don't take it as prescribed. And so all that drug, your brain gets overloaded, and so you don't breathe, and if you don't get help, well, safe to say you die. So anyway, back to me. So within seconds, we've got the Narcan and we begin to administer it to this woman. We're now able to bring her back after quite the scare, and it's when we hear that gasp for breath that we knew that she was now in the clear. Thank the Lord. She was pretty confused after she woke up, I can imagine, and then I asked her if she had taken these pills. She recalls taking 2 of them. These were 5 milligram, and she had taken 10 milligram. Well, long story short, she was here in the emergency room for something completely unrelated, and she had brought those pills with her that were prescribed to her by a doctor. Since she was still waiting to be helped by the nurses and possibly be given medication, she ended up taking 2 of those. It was too much for her, and so after it started to take effect, she was having this issue and so she collapsed. Needless to say, we were able to save her from that close call, but of course, this is just one of the stories I have to share with you. I'll share the next one in just a bit. Hey, it's the same nurse here again from the previous story about the overdose. I mentioned I had another story to share with you. Here's that story. This was before I started working in the emergency room. I used to work on the orthopedic floor of my hospital. So it was a Sunday. I remember because I was going to have the next 3 days off, and it's about an hour and a half before the end of my shift. Myself and another nurse were helping taking care of a patient who had come in because he had broken an arm. This man was also mentally ill, and he at times had to be restrained because he was trying to injure himself, as well as detach the IV lines from his arms. A couple of times I had to stop him from doing that. Well, I was about to take over for the nurse looking after him, and as she's helping him with changing the sheets on the bed, he had been transferred over to a wheelchair nearby, by the way. He suddenly started screaming and shouting at us, Now, we're trained professionals, so we were trying to calm him down and tell him that we were only here to help him and that everything was going to be alright. He then begins to pull on the IV lines, and we're trying to get him to stop so he wouldn't cause any further injuries to himself. My fellow nurse called a couple of more nurses to help out at this point, as she's now at the door just a few feet behind me. Well, all of a sudden, without warning, the patient jumped out of the wheelchair and tackles me to the ground like a football player would in a football game. Then I remember as things go into slow motion, as he begins to put his good arm over my neck and then begins to try choking me. Well, safe to say, I'm freaking out at this point, as even while being on a bunch of drugs to help sedate his pain, he's pretty strong, and he had quite the grasp too. As I struggle to breathe and get him off of me, my fellow nurses, and even a resident doctor who had been walking nearby the room, are able to help get him off of me, and soon, after a struggle, we are able to get him back into his bed, and he was further sedated to help calm him down. I was left shocked and quite scared, to be honest, that for the first time in a long while, I started to have an anxiety attack after one of the nurses had walked me out of the room and down the hallway. I did have to try my best to regain my composure, however, as I powered on through and finished the rest of my shift. That night, as well as the following 3 nights, I had a hard time sleeping, and I was even having dreams where I was with him in that room, and he would once again be having me pinned to the floor, and he would be choking me. However, I would wake up from those nightmares after I swear it felt like I was struggling to breathe. Crazy what your brain can do to you, huh? Anyway, by the time I had gone back to work, the man had been discharged, and I never did see nor hear from him again. So yeah, those were my 2 stories I thought I'd share with you, as well as for the Creepy Fox family to hear. I got more stories, but I've been quite busy. Just let me know if you need more, and I'll make sure to email and write you in. In 2016, I'd started a new venture in my life, so to speak. I dropped out of college a few months prior, and I was having a hard time in my life, as at that point my mother had passed away due to cancer. It hit me quite hard, and it wasn't until a chance encounter at the hospital that life would change. After my mom had passed away, my grandmother started to develop health issues, and she had suffered a stroke, which, though mild, did leave her in the hospital for about 2 weeks. Just as I did with my mom, I also would visit my grandma as she went about her recovery. It was while during one of these visits, I was now taking turns with my uncle who came to visit her. I was in the cafeteria area eating. This is where I ended up looking up at a flyer on a wall, and it talked about a volunteer program here at the hospital. Now, I was in between jobs at that point, and so I told myself, maybe if I do this hospital volunteering thing, it can give me some time to heal by helping others, and perhaps it could also potentially lead to me getting a job, which I later would get one there after getting good word from one of the nurses. Anyway, I went through the process of applying for the volunteer program at the hospital, this about a month after my grandmother had been discharged, and I got dropped off by my dad roughly an hour early on the day of orientation happening, since I wanted to make sure I found the right place to where I needed to go to. It actually took me quite a bit of time, but when I asked for directions, I got pointed to an education building at the very far end of the hospital. When I arrived, there was an employee from the hospital who basically told me to go ahead and sign in, and then wait outside since the instructor was running a little bit late. But that was okay. I just took a seat at a nearby bench, and as time starts to pass, I see as more people are now arriving, some as young as me. I was 24 at the time, and there's others in their 40s and early 50s. I got approached by another girl around my age, and we soon hit it off talking a little bit about the program we would be starting, as well as a little bit about us. This got interrupted about 10 minutes later when we take a look behind us as we heard somebody call out and say, "Hey, pretty girls on the bench." We turned around and it's this pretty beat up man in a trench coat that looked extremely worn down and dirty. The man was very strange looking, that's the nice way of me putting it, with a look as if he hadn't showered in months. You can also see dandruff on his dreadlock hair, and his teeth were stained bright yellow when he smiled at us. We did find this a bit weird, but we ignored him and then got back to talking. But apparently he didn't like this, as he now got closer and told us that he was trying to speak to us and that we were being rude for ignoring him. We are a bit unnerved at this point since he was a bit more aggressive at this point, and we told him just to leave us alone. At this moment, another couple of adults ended up walking over and they asked the man if there was a problem, to which he said no, there wasn't a problem, and he was just speaking to his two beautiful daughters. Ugh, yeah, no dude, we weren't your daughters. And the fact that he said that was so creepy. Anyway, clearly looking at the reactions on our faces, the two men tell this guy to get lost, and to our surprise he does. But unfortunately, this was only going to be the beginning of this scary experience, because he isn't going to be done just yet. Fast forward about 2 hours after the orientation program had ended. By now, I had made my way across the street from the hospital to the guest drop-off parking area, as my dad told me he was going to get there in about 5 minutes, but he didn't want to deal with the traffic where I was earlier at the hospital. The sun had also just set about 30 minutes ago, so it's already pretty dark. As I stood there, looking down at my phone, I heard footsteps behind me, followed by the voice of a man. "You're that pretty girl from before." I turned around and to my absolute horror, it's that creep in the trench coat I mentioned that looked as if he hadn't showered in months. At that point, I said, "I'm not looking for trouble, I'm just waiting for my dad." And then he started to get closer, and he said that he could be my daddy and he could show me pleasures like I'd never known before. Those were his exact words. That freaked me out since I knew now what he was up to, and I was shocked that nobody had reported him. Although to be fair, that was kind of our fault as well, since we should have said something when we encountered him earlier. We just kind of figured that he would have gotten the idea and left us alone, as well as everybody else at the hospital, and that he was just some creepy dude looking to get under people's skins. Well, I'm shocked when, as I start to walk away, he begins to follow me as he says, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Yeah, that made me really mad, but I didn't care at this point. I had enough of him, so I shouted out, trying to get someone's attention and basically saying something along the lines of, "Get away from me, you pervert." I saw his eyes widened under the light next to him, which shined on his face, and even that doesn't stop him from approaching me. Just then, however, I hear the voice of my dad, and I turn around to see as he's pulling up into the parking lot. "Dad, he's trying to kidnap me," I said, seeing my dad's window was rolled down. My dad, being a former Marine, literally stopped the car right there and then jumps out of the driver's seat, easily towering over this creep. The creep, then tucking his tail between his legs so to speak, books it in the opposite direction and disappears into the darkness behind one of the nearby buildings. Yeah, safe to say I was pretty freaked out by that whole incident. We decided to go ahead and tell a security guard at the hospital, and the funny thing was they had already gotten a report about some creep that was acting suspicious just a few minutes ago, and that the police were coming to check things out. Anyway, long story short, I did overhear a few days later that the police did catch up to him and talk to him, but whether or not he was arrested or charged with anything, I'm not too sure. I did never see him near the hospital again, so I'm guessing he's since moved on, hopefully to better things. Going to the emergency room as a patient really will test an individual's, well, patience, that is. What any normal person would think should be maybe an hour or two tops turns easily into 8 to 10 hours of waiting. But you can't really blame the doctors and the nurses. They already have it really rough. And actually, I do want to go ahead and give them all a shout out, as what you all do is really taken for granted. Really, next time you see a doctor or a nurse, make sure to tell them thank you, as they have to deal with quite a lot, and they save lives too. Anyway, this was November 2021, and my dad had taken me to the emergency room at roughly 7 p.m. after I had a nasty fall at the park playing with my younger brothers. I could feel that my arm had been shattered after I fell off the jungle gym, and spoiler alert, it was broken indeed. The emergency room was actually pretty busy. I counted about 30-ish people that were waiting in the lobby, and me in pain, I look at my dad and think, great, we're going to be here forever. Fast forward about an hour and a half later. By now, I'd done an x-ray and I'd been given something for the pain. We're in the lobby waiting to hear back from the doctor. In the 15 minutes that we had been out of the lobby, a man, mid-30s, around 6 foot, skinny with acne all over his face. He's got long straight jet black hair, wearing a ram sweater, and has a bunch of holes in his pants, and he's wearing no shoes. He's pacing back and forth in the lobby, and he's acting very bizarrely too. Now, since back then, and even today, masks are required in the hospital and the emergency room, the nurses were having to constantly tell him that he had to keep his mask on, otherwise he would need to go outside and wait if he didn't want to wear it. He pretty much kept cursing back at them and telling him that he didn't care and that he didn't want to wear it, etc., etc. Strange, but it wasn't really my problem. We ended up taking a seat far away from him next to a nice family as he continued to pace back and forth and cause problems. The family overheard the details, saying that he got dropped off by a friend, which they had overheard since we're next to the front desk, and they could tell immediately that he must have been off his meds or something because he was acting the way he was, and said that he was coming in because he was having really bad pains in his knees. Strange considering he's pacing back and forth and not sitting down. By this point, I took a look at my dad, and I could tell that he was at his breaking point with wanting to use the restroom. You see, he had been having a hard time going to the restroom earlier that day because of constipation, and so he ended up taking laxatives that were prescribed to him by the doctor in the morning. It's about to go boom down there for him, so I just told him, "Go, Dad, it's okay." And he says he would be back as fast as he could, although he did take about a solid 20 minutes. Poor guy. Sorry to those of you who might be eating and heard me saying this. I'm just telling you why he had left me and what's about to happen. That was pretty freaky. When he left, I started talking to the couple that we were sitting next to, and they were there because their son had apparently also broken bones, but instead of his arm, it was his foot, and they were currently waiting for him to come back from the x-rays. As we're talking, that man that's screaming obscenities comes over to my area and overhears us talking. He now starts to act extremely racist. I'm Mexican, by the way, and so was the family I'm speaking to, so obviously we are speaking in Spanish. He now starts telling us how we live in America and how we should only be speaking English, and I ended up getting fed up at this point and telling him to leave us alone. He continued with even more insults that I'd rather not repeat here for obvious reasons, and then, I kid you not, he bends down and gets right into my face. He then starts to threaten me some more, saying he was going to beat me up if I didn't start speaking in English, and it's at this exact moment I look behind him and see, as one of the people waiting in the lobby, a guy even taller than this already tall freak. He then walks on over and tells him to stop. And he does. "You're just like him, aren't you?" I can still remember him saying, as he then puts his fists up as if he wanted to fight. They almost do, but it's at this moment 2 security guards, who I guess have been called over due to this guy's disturbing behavior, come in and are able to break things up. What ensues is even more racial slurs and fighting, but they do manage to get him under control and take him outside. I don't know what happened after that, because after they disappeared behind the building, which I could see through the window, I didn't see him again. So anyway, my dad did eventually come back, and I told him about the crazy guy, and my dad lost it. He wanted to fight that guy right there and then, but of course he's long gone. I just told my dad, whatever, he's already left, and so soon he cools off, and we go about the rest of the night in peace. Well, as peacefully as could be, all things considered. I did eventually make a full recovery, and I got back into playing sports with my friends once I was medically cleared to do so. So hands down, one of the more scarier nights of my life. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what you all thought. And subscribe and turn on notifications if you're brand new. Also, make sure to check out our song, Make a Start. You can find it on Apple Music, Spotify, or even here on YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel and check it out underneath the Creepy Fox topic section. Also, consider grabbing some Creepy Fox merchandise, which you can see right below the video. And if you want early access to brand new videos with no advertisements, as well as exclusive narration videos not available to anyone else, consider becoming a channel member. Which, speaking of, I'd like to go ahead and give them all a shout out. Thank you to Robbie, Bo, Spunky the Nutcase, Rice and Beans, Scott, Sean, Corey, Linz, Maribel, Medu Satil, and our newest member, Silent. Thank you also to the regular viewers who watch the uploads, like, comment, and share them with their family and friends. I appreciate and love every single one of you. Thanks once again for stopping by, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care, and have yourself an amazing day.